Hello and welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about leading remote teams, online collaboration, and working in distributed organizations. This podcast is brought to you by Virtual Not Distant, where we help managers and teams transition to an office-optional approach. Find out everything we do over at virtualnotdistant.com and check out our show notes and pictures of our lovely guests over on the podcast page. It's great to have you here, listeners. Let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to episode 272 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, which today is a What's Going On episode. And we're going to focus on hybrid workplaces, because that is what's going on. We are recording on the 4th of May, 2021. And so there are plenty of news around about what organizations are planning for the near future. So we'll have a good look at that. And we'll also touch on the recent news surrounding the company Basecamp, which in my mind, has brought to the forefront one of the issues which can arise from having a mainly asynchronous environment at work. So we'll look at it. We'll see what else comes up around it, but I don't think we can ignore it. And of course, when I say we, I'm Pilar Orti, Director of Virtual Not Distant, and you've probably just heard Maya on the other line, Maya Middlemiss. Hello, Maya.
Hello, Pilar. Hi, everybody.
So before we look at the news around hybrid, I thought, Maya, I'd share with listeners and, of course, yourself, my own thoughts about the hybrid workplace. And this is something that's been brought about by a conversation I was having with you, Maya, and a couple of conversations I was having with Teresa Sigilito-Hollema. And what I'm thinking is that everyone's talking about going hybrid, but everyone's talking about different things. It's a bit like the conversation around remote. Yeah, you can be remote, but what does that mean? So I've been thinking that there's three things that overall companies are talking about. And of course, there's many more. And what's exciting about the space at the moment and that conversation is that different companies are calling it differently. And it says a lot about their culture.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that from what I'm hearing for hybrid workplaces, there's companies that are going to go remote first, which is about really knowing that anyone could be, that anyone can be remote, and we're accepting that people might not want to be ever in the office. That's how we run. That's remote first. Then remote ready, which is people probably are using the office a bit, some maybe a lot, but we know that if tomorrow there's another lockdown, everyone can go home and we are ready for it, or whatever, or something happens, the office burns down and we can more or less continue from wherever. And then finally, and I wonder whether this is where most traditional and especially larger organizations are going to, which is trusted working from home, which just means it's pretty much what we had in many advanced places in 2019, which was if you wanted to work from home a couple of days a week, you could, and it was fine. But work happens in the office. And I shared these remote first, remote ready, and trusted working from home on Twitter. And of course, Professor Gloria Romsbottom had a fourth category to add, which was WFH OMDB.
What on earth is that?
Working from home over my dead body.
Right. Okay. Yes, I'm sure there's a few workspaces like that or places that want to get back to that as their normality anyway.
Yeah, so I thought it was funny. I would share it with listeners. So I don't know. I was just thinking that the important thing really is being clear about what that hybrid workplace looks like, what it means for you. One, for the people who are going to go into that now, the current employees, and also from the point of view of recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely. What on earth are you applying for? It feels a little bit like, I know that some organizations are starting to talk about what they mean by hybrid work at the moment, but for the last few months, there's been an awful lot of organizations saying, yes, definitely hybrid. That's how we see things, but not actually explaining what on earth they mean by that, what it might look like, and maybe a sense of wanting other people to go first and publish some workable policies that other people can look at and model from or tip their hand a little bit. And maybe we'll see a lot more concrete stuff coming out over the next few weeks. But really, at the moment, it seems to embrace a whole multitude of different things, from hot desking to genuine remote first flexibility. So lots of questions you'll need to be asking if you're looking for a new remote first role.
Yes, and I have to say, the day it hit me what all this meant, I was really upset because I realized how much these new remote employees in a hybrid workspace actually just meant the trusted working from home. And there's still no conversation around near home offices, around working from anywhere, around co-working spaces. I don't know, about basically the stuff that we would like to talk about. Probably it's too early anyway, but the whole socioeconomic change and really understanding that not all the work has to be in certain cities and stuff like that. I think it's too early for that, but I think for me the realization that a lot of people are not talking about any of that, but you stay positive.
We'll try.
So you're saying, Maya, about okay, so how is this going to look? So what I've put together a collection of different organizations who are saying that they're going to go in different ways, and I am going to start with Google. And the reason for that is, of course, still everyone wants to be like Google. I don't know why. They're great, and Work Rules is a fantastic book, and if that's a reflection of how their culture was built and how it continues to be, yes, of course. However, they have a very specific culture and they do specific stuff. But Google is saying, and I'm going to quote from the New York Times article from the 14th of December of 2020. In an email to staff on Sunday night, Sundar Pichai, chief executive of Google's parent company, Alphabet, said the company was testing the idea of a flexible work week once it's safe to return to the office. Under the pilot plan, employees would be expected to work at least 3 days a week in the office for collaboration days, and then the other 2 they can work from home. And this, everyone's going to look at it and go, this is what we're going to do. Because, of course, you have to be in the office for collaboration. That's why the 3 days a week are collaboration days.
Yeah, and when you're working from home, you won't collaborate at all. And when those 3 days, you somehow have to be collaborating with other people all the time rather than getting on with some work of your own. There's no flexibility here. This expectation of at least 3 days a week. What if you're working on a big report and you just need to get your head down for 2 weeks? You have to come into the office for 3 days. There's no real flexibility here, and it seems that they're basing it around this sort of preset expectation rather than around the work itself and what you need to do it.
Yeah, I think they will have flexibility, like for example, what you mentioned. If this is, I imagine, well, I hope, I don't know anyone there, but from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing, that's probably the case. They also have satellite offices near train stations for people who don't, for whatever reason, they don't want to commute in. So but I think what really got me here was this thing of collaboration has to happen in the office and together, and I imagine in real time. And I'm thinking whether we need to stop using these words without really going into the processes and how it works.
Yeah.
Because collaboration does need real-time conversations, but from what I see, the collaborations that work happen because people go and do the work.
Yeah. Does that mean we haven't collaborated for a year?
Yeah. Well, also, yeah, exactly. So if you take this podcast, which is a collaborative process, you have the planning that takes place usually in my head, and then I communicate it on Trello. Then there's some backwards and forwards between you and me, Maya, for example. And then we record real time. Yeah, okay, this is the equivalent of being in the office together. We could be in a studio together. That'd be great. But, we need the time together. Yeah. We're not. But then that's it.
Yeah.
Neither you, Ross, or myself do anything together again. So but it's still collaboration.
Of course it
and
is.
This is
It's a
what's been
whole
my headache.
process. And, we're in 3 different countries. We could be in the same building. We could be in the same room to do this. But we don't need to be. And it's completely independent of where you're located. And yeah, it just seems to me, obviously, hopefully this thinking has moved on a little bit. I know that there's been something more recent from Google about trying to get more people back to the office. But I think it just shows that one of the world's biggest employers is still working this out. And maybe we should expect a lot more change and evolution as time goes on, because this isn't finished yet, is it?
No, not at all. It's just starting. And it's important that the conversation is there and Google can do what they want.
Yep. Oh, they will.
My concern is how many people will look to that model.
Yeah.
Back to your earlier point, go, okay, they've got it sorted. That's it. Without looking at, well, is that the thing that we should be doing? On the other hand, a completely different kind of business nationwide. So building society, banking, financial services, nationwide tells 13,000 staff to work anywhere. Right. So this is a very different kind of conversation. And shout out to Anish Indocha for sharing this on his newsletter. We'll put a link to Handish's newsletter in the show notes so you can sign up if you want to. And I was delighted to see this. And I know that, the realities of working anywhere are also difficult. Yeah. Because you can't just work from anywhere. You do need a space. So every setup has its challenges. But what I really like was, and this is a quote from the BBC article when is it from? Let me just set up the link so we can...
This is 25th of March.
Thank you very much.
This is quite recent.
So still recent. What I really liked was the quote, "The move towards flexible working will see changing the configuration of offices with more collaboration spaces and fewer meeting rooms, as well as introducing quiet areas and designated walking and cycling routes." This looks to me like a holistic vision of the workplace.
Yeah, it really does. This is really exciting. And while people will pounce on it and say, oh, you can't work from anywhere, what about health and safety, what about employment law and things like that, it's the attitude underlying it, that it's about trust and finding out what works for you, what fits into your lifestyle, and bringing that into the organisation. I really, really like this. There's another statement in here that really appealed to me as well, that they're actually embracing what remote work has brought to their team, because it's making people more empathetic with customers, the fact that people have been working from home and sort of taking their work out into the communities where their customers live and seeing glimpses of people's homes and children and things like that has actually made them better at what they do. So, yeah, really nice attitude.
Wow, excellent. That I didn't pick up on that. Wonderful. And also the fact that if we really are embracing this remote first or work from anywhere mindset, then the office also needs to change. And of course we know that we've had activity-based work going around for ages, which allows for that, which even gives the office more of a co-working space feel than this is the office, these are the desks, and you have meeting rooms and that's it. It's really pleasing. And Maya will put a link in the show notes to an article from 2017 about the different spaces that we might need when we are looking at teamwork, which I think to remember were collaboration, communication, concentration, and contemplation. Yes. And I really like that, because
I love that you wrote this years ago, but it's now people can kind of take this on board and think, what do we want? What are we going to use all these different choices for? Yes. What do we actually do, and what does that require of the environment around us? Because I think there's no way you would build or design a building now for people to go and sit next to each other, working on different things and not really speaking to each other, that they travel hours to get to every day. I mean, it's just, why would you do that? Whereas you can plan for much more creative and flexible, collaborative spaces. You wouldn't build any office building now unless it was somewhere that people could work in flexibly, that you could work remotely with anyone in the world. You have to have that collaboration technology kind of embedded in each room. And also you'd build it with the idea of people being able to book it flexibly and come and go and, take their assets and devices with them and so on. So it's going to be so interesting to see what happens to all the office buildings we've already got designed around cubicles and little offices and things. How will they change over the years? Will they all get run down and disappear? Will they get rebuilt? Will they get repurposed as residential? So yeah, can't wait to see what happens.
And quiet spaces also. I like that there's an emphasis here, because it could well be that you like to go into the office for deep work.
Yeah.
And you like to stay at home for online meetings. So again, there's just so many, takes us back to the early conversation, that there's assumptions that certain things are better done in certain places, and actually that might not be the case. So there's also an interesting link to a thread by @Hofi, who has like just 5 or 6 other companies, what they're doing, including Clifford Chance, which is a law practice. So I think this is an interesting conversation. I did find one other article. I'm just going to touch on it because I've tweeted them to see whether it was an April Fool's joke, but I haven't had an answer. And it was Atlassian saying they were sending someone into space to test their collaboration tools. I don't know.
This was on April the 1st. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Atlassian have been announcing lots of stuff about remote first attitude. And the thing is, we already have very remote teams like this. I think Lisette Sutherland mentioned it in her book that, this is a remote collaboration with people in orbit and people in mission control. So virtual distance is an interesting concept, but I'm not sure about Atlassian, but who knows in the future.
Yes. So they call themselves, in referring to what you're saying, they're talking about team anywhere also. So they're using that language as well. And Katrina Bolle-Carbonell once referred me to some research that had been done around async communication, I think with voice, and that was to do with space also. So yeah, you're completely right that it's, even if they were doing it, it wouldn't be new. Then I just wanted to touch also, before we move on, GM is talking about work appropriately, as a way of saying to their people, look, it's not even about where you work from, it's not even about when you work, it's about work appropriately. And that is in line with one of the other slogans, internal slogans, which I can't remember.
Yeah, I think they started with the dress appropriately.
That's it. That's it. Thank you.
But I just love the implicit trust in that. It's like, you know what you need to get done what you have to do. So we're not going to put any parameters on it other than just be appropriate. Use your common sense, use your judgment, in the same way that you can decide whether you need overalls or toe cap boots or whatever to be safe in the workplace. We put that responsibility on you to decide where your work's going to get done. It's just so obvious. I love that really, really short policy.
And it gives some flexibility to the teams also, because I think we have to remember that saying things like, this number of days in the office, this number's not, well, some teams might actually need 5 days together in the office, and some people actually might need none. So again, anyway, so this is what's going on around that topic. And I just think, well, like, it's fascinating. And the important thing is that the conversations out there, it's not just going to what it was before. And like you say, this is opening up so many conversations within companies that it is exciting. It is. So where does this leave? I feel, again, like the co-working industry and co-working spaces are not having any presence in these conversations in the mainstream. And I do want to bring Bernie Mitchell back to talk about this. I just can't find a gap in the schedule. There's so many conversations sitting in my computer at the moment that I can't fit Bernie in. But another newsletter I'm subscribed to is Bernie's newsletter. And I thought that I would just read out something he wrote, and I thought that it was very interesting. So it's got to do about co-working and the co-working industry. So I'll just read it out. So he said, in the last 2 weeks, I've produced and hosted a couple of Future of Work online conferences. The first was the Co-working Symposium, and then I hosted the Afternoon of Workplace Trends Research Summit. At the end of it, all these things are swimming around my head. 1. What the co-working industry thinks it is and what other people think it is are miles apart. For years, people have been opening local, neighborhood, rural spaces and looking at the high street. I'm hanging with super intelligent people talking about stuff that has been happening for years, but even they don't know about it. In the Freelance Heroes group, probably a group that Bernie is either started or is a part of, we asked why you would not use a co-working space. And one of the main things was security, also noise in a neurodiversity way, and car parking. 3. The Workplace Trends event was full of people talking about how we will make inclusion, diversity, and accessibility, etc. happen. Whereas most of the co-working industry is wimping out and still talking about whether it's something we should spend time on. Apart from the co-working, Idea Project is working to change this, of course. So I suppose that's another of his projects. 4, and I love this. People are missing people, not the office. Most of you reading this will not be surprised by this. I'm surprised by how many people say they like their job, but not the place they have to work in and are happy working from home. The effort of going to work, getting dressed, making lunch, and rushing to be on time is unattractive. Kate Lister cited that 70%-ish of people who call in sick are not sick. They are sick of work. You can make yourself open a computer and work from home. It is the commute that you don't want to do. 5. We have a huge opportunity to make the world work better. Frequently, and not in a bunny-hugging way, people and planet are spoken about people and planet are spoken about next to profit and purpose. I've been paying attention to conversations around from panic to devastation to whatever this part is. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Bernie.
Yeah, no, that sounds like, is that a newsletter?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was put a link for that one because I don't think I get that one.
No, his newsletters are very personal, and it helps if you know him in some shape or form because you can hear him and stuff. But this one in particular, it just struck me, especially this thing about what the co-working industry thinks it is and what other people think it is, miles apart. You could have said this about the remote, and you can still say that about the heavy, the early adopters of remote work and what we're seeing now as well. And the people miss people.
Yes,
because,
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I was having the conversation around how upset I was of the realization that hybrid workplaces were not office optional spaces. They were come into the office you must spaces. And I was talking to my husband and he said, well, just remember that right now, everyone wants to go back to the office as it's the main container of social interaction. But maybe within the next 2 years, when we've got, well, hopefully, I don't want to jinx anything, but when society opens up more and at least we've got more control of how we have our social interactions, maybe that won't be the case.
Yeah.
Because then people will question, well, do I want to be doing this? Do I want to be doing this? Actually, I don't need to see you every day anymore.
Yes, and I think there is a huge kind of nostalgic greener grass factor at the moment that people aren't necessarily wanting to go back to the office, but they're wanting to go back to 2019 before we had all of this to deal with. And, they're still conflating working from home with living in a pandemic and the lack of social contact that's brought about. And what we miss is that everyday buzz of being around people at work, but we haven't been able to recreate that well in every team. So co-workings have so much to offer potentially, and they will find their place, I'm sure, in that matrix of places that we live and work and spend time in and carry out different activities. But I think there's a chance for them to hopefully redefine themselves in just the same way that work is being redefined. And I hope that we'll hear co-workings firmly inserted into the conversation as we look at hybrid and optionality and a greater flexibility in that phrase we've all hate already, the new normality, even though nobody knows what it is yet.
Yeah, I really hope so. And there was an article I wrote some time ago, Flexible Work is Not Working from Home. And it was all about a friend of mine. I've been having this conversation when they said, okay, you now need to be working from home. And he'd said, I can't work from home. I just cannot. It's not, my mind just does not let me. Could you get me membership of a co-working space? And they were no. So I'm hoping that if that person has that same conversation now, that they will be looked at differently. And I really, really hope that. Anyway, so please, if you are in any position to influence what happens in your company in the future, then do look into co-working, whether that's something that would be of use, what the implications might be. And it could well be that there are no co-working spaces next to your people and it's not even an option. But at least make sure you know that they're there.
Have a look, because there might be ones you don't know about. There might be scope to open, there might be Peanuts rent office buildings available near where some people work that you could lease and set up a local co-working. There's so many possibilities that are not the all or nothing of work from home or go back to the central office.
Excellent. So that's that. So that's the spaces. Now, what happens when you are fully distributed? Mm-hmm. What happens when you rely mainly on asynchronous communication? And this is to show also that we know that every single setup has issues, regardless of whether your organization or your team relies mainly on synchronous communication and whether they rely mainly on async or anywhere in the middle, whether they can work from anywhere or not. There's always plus and minuses. And so the news that something that happened only last week, it will be another week on top of this, if you're listening, even on the week of release of this episode, is that, I don't know about you, Maya, but I go on Twitter every now and then and just to see what's trending, just to get out of my my bubble. And it's often quite fun. And sometimes actually I find out stuff that otherwise I wouldn't. And also I see a range of opinions, which is what I think Twitter is great. If you start to scroll around and really dig into comments, you can see that people have diverse opinions, poles apart sometimes. And I saw that Basecamp was trending in the UK, and I thought, is this the Basecamp that we all know and love? And it was.
Oh, yeah.
And so what happened, listeners, is that I think on Friday, it must have been the last day of April, the founders of Basecamp announced certain changes at their company that went online. Everyone, of course, we all have an opinion on it. And then the following day, I think the numbers are around 25% of people resigned from the company, including the host of Rework, the podcast, who I really like. So I thought I'd look into it. And it is also such a huge reminder of not just looking at a headline or at a tweet and just going and seeing, okay, what was said there. So I encourage you, listeners, if you are any interest in this, to go and to look at Jason Fried's announcement, because we'll see that there's quite a lot of stuff going on. But the note that hit the headlines was the fact that they said that you couldn't, no more societal and political discussions. So that was the headline, is Basecamp bans all discussions about politics and society at work, or in the office even. I saw this translated. So I just thought I wanted to bring back this thing in, and then we can have a conversation. Maya, if you just bear with me talking just for 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring just this point. So I'm not going to go into any of the other stuff they've said, because that's a theme for another conversation, and not one that I would want to have without anyone from the company around from different opinions. But regarding this banning of political discussions, this is what was written down. No more societal and political discussions on our company Basecamp account. Listeners, if you don't know this, Basecamp is another collaboration platform. It's like a project management tool. So no more societal and political discussions on our company Basecamp account. Today's social and political waters, especially choppy. Sensitivities are at 11, and every discussion remotely related to politics, advocacy, or society at large quickly spits away from pleasant. You shouldn't have to wonder if staying out of it means you're complicit or wading into it means you're a target. These are difficult enough waters to navigate in life, but significantly more so at work. It's become too much, it's a major distraction, it saps our energy and redirects our dialogue towards dark places. It's not healthy, it hasn't served us well. And we're done with it on our company Basecamp account where the work happens. People can take the conversations with willing co-workers to Signal, WhatsApp, or even a personal Basecamp account, but it can't happen where the work happens anymore.
Whoa.
It just left me thinking, for one, Basecamp has not been built for discussions. You can't have a discussion on Basecamp because you can either have the Campfire, which is a long stream of messages which is just like WhatsApp, you can't quote, you can't thread,
Right.
you can't do anything. And then the message board, which is where you would have a conversation, you have to open it's like you have to open a new big message. And that's it. So it's not like Slack, where you can thread, where you just go from one place to another. We use it at the IAF England and Wales, and I did at one point to put to them, look, you are chatty, you like conversations. This is not conducive to that. So I am not surprised about saying...
take it somewhere else then. They're saying,
yes,
take it outside.
Take it outside. But it did... So apart from that, and I know that... I mean, if people are if this is how the company has been running for 20 years and people are used to having those discussions in Basecamp, it is actually quite a blow.
Yes, it's a huge shift. And that's why they've got this wave of resignations, because it's a very controlling behaviour to say you're allowed to talk about this, but you're not allowed to talk about that. You can see that in a creative company where presumably a broad range of dialogue has previously been, if not encouraged, then at least accepted, to suddenly crack down like this is going to leave a lot of people feeling that it's directed at them or something they said or a view that they support. And, that's being reflected in this big wave, or people just feeling that that everything is political, that they're afraid to speak about anything because despite the quite specificness of this communication, it's still actually very unclear where lines are drawn on individual subjects and communications. And the last thing you want on a remote team, on any team, is people afraid to open their mouths about anything. And if you want to encourage, maybe they really just need to completely separate the work chat from the everything else chat. But then a lot of what we talk about in terms of planned spontaneity and connecting with whole people strays into that area, because people do have opinions. If we want them to bring their whole selves to work, that's going to involve some things that you would describe as social and political.
Yeah, I think separating it and I think that could have been a solution. I'm sure that they thought about that we now have two very separate spaces, one which is about the work and one which is about being ourselves in any way we can. Whether that would have helped or not. Also, they're not saying, this is just about the Basecamp. So these people also have meetings every now and then. They have stuff. I'm sure they have even coffee sometimes with each other. And it doesn't look like it's about that. But then, of course, you start to question. So it's really complicated. But I do recommend, if you want to look at this, there are 5 other points. This is not the only change. There are 5 other points which have to do with benefits. They have to do with the way that decisions are made. So there is more to this. However, if we're talking about what was happening in Basecamp itself, which is an asynchronous communication, mainly text-based space, while we're encouraging companies and organizations have been doing this, and teams, to open up the water cooler channel, the whatever channel, and especially we always say that there are people who want to have deeper conversations, not just fluffy ones. What happens when it gets out of hand? What happens when... Because if you have a conversation in the office, like Maya, I have a conversation, we have a disagreement, and we finish it or not, and then it's done. But if you have it in an asynchronous space, and you write your thing, and I come later, like 5 hours later, write my thing, someone else comes 2 days later, writes their thing, I can see the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like this whole thing, we'll put the link so you can read the backstory to it. The whole thing arose about written communications from a long time ago and behaviours that were maybe acceptable, sort of goofing around in a startup, which just aren't appropriate once you're an international business. And it really reminds us of the persistence of written communication and the fact that there's no such thing as a throwaway remark when it's going to be there forever. And, this is something that is unique to async, which we can't forget about. And sometimes that's a very good thing. It can expose harassment and things like that, which might have happened whispered in corridors with no witnesses before. These things do get preserved. But also it means that behaviour that wasn't, or communications that were never meant to really stick around and be part of your company's culture and archive forever is always going to be there. And you never know who's going to read it or read into it different things in years to come when the context has completely changed.
It also means that it is difficult to show up as your whole self in the asynchronous space, because, and this is something that I have heard before as well. And remember, listeners, we're talking more about not the very straightforward work communication, but we're talking about discussions that start to be, that start to be difficult, actually. And can I say this like this? Is this going to show actually a part of me that I'm okay to express when I'm spontaneous, but actually in the written captured format might not be right?
Yeah.
So
it's very difficult. It's like somebody running for office and somebody digs out a tweet from 10 years ago that shows a view that they no longer hold, but it's there and because someone screen captured it at the time, and they're going to have to answer for that, and it can affect their future and their career. It's it's like all the people growing up on social media with their regrettable Instagrams that a future employer might find or something. It's a salutary reminder that this stuff doesn't go away in our digital first world, and this is part of the culture of how we work today, and we're all going to have to take account of that without somehow continually self-censoring ourselves and not being able to express ourselves at all. I don't know where we're going to find the balance.
Well, we won't find it. But I think it's really good conversation to be having. Yes, where's the balance between self-censorship and actually, and putting something out there that is perennial, that we don't want it to be perennial? Or what do we do with, something that could happen in a team is that every now and then you archive channels or you archive conversations.
Yeah.
And I know that maybe they can then dig it out, whatever, but that's not the point. The point that what's happening here, I think, is that these conversations are staring you in the face constantly. Yes. Which is something that doesn't happen when you have them in real time. And that seems to me to be one of the issues, is that you can't get away from them because they're there. And actually, you can't look through a thread and see if there's anything you should be paying attention to without scanning stuff. So this is something that we need to start learning when we are using things like channels in Slack or Teams. And if you're using Basecamp, good luck. Can we archive? Are there things that we set up and they are transitory, and we agree that we archive them so we don't have to look at them, so we don't have to scan through them?
Yeah.
We mark them in some way. I don't know. The problem is that we then start to maybe overthink, and that's when you say like the self-censorship. But maybe it's something, if we want to do this for the long run, we do have to address this kind of stuff.
We need some way to be throwaway and ephemeral. Maybe you just have all the free accounts, so something like free Slack, so your messages disappear when you fill up the account too much. And all your old
it's
stuff
more
vanishes.
about the coming back to it and seeing it. So more than the fact that it's archived, it's the day to day that it can affect.
Yeah, and it's something that this is an interesting precedent. We're starting to see a few companies now have started to take this kind of a stance, and we'll learn from these pioneering experiences. Basecamp have often liked to be first in tackling difficult things. We'll see how they get on with this. They didn't manage to completely solve email and all its problems. Let's see how they solve this one. At least they've always been courageous about saying, we're going to do this. And obviously it's cost them staff, it's cost them goodwill, it's cost them some public embarrassment. Let's see what the outcome is. It will certainly have interesting implications for all of us.
There were some people who were saying, yeah, right on, as well.
Yeah.
So I think that is also that's the first thing that struck me about the whole conversation is you cannot agree. We can't agree on that, but we have to have a conversation. And then at some point, I suppose we've got to go towards one way or the other. Yeah, but like you say, kudos that they're doing this in public and we can all learn from them.
Yep.
Yeah. So talking of ephemeral, I had my first play with Twitter Spaces today, and I loved it. So Twitter Spaces are what I was waiting for. I didn't jump on the Clubhouse bandwagon because I thought someone else will do it. It'll be easier. And I opened a Twitter Space today just to test. And Melanie Purcell jumped in. She's someone who was on the show many years ago. And I just talked to her for 5 minutes.
Cool.
Someone else also popped in and left.
I saw an alert on my phone, but I missed it because I know you were just testing it. And we're going to do it properly tomorrow.
Well, that's the thing, that she saw the alert and I was thinking, oh my God, we better start tweaking our notifications or else we're going to be alerted all the time. But the audio quality, I didn't even notice it until she said it, was like a good phone call.
Okay, that's good to know because it's not always great on Clubhouse. I mean, like every audio experience, it depends on kind of the weakest link factor of everybody's local connections, and it also depends on good audio hygiene of people remembering to mute and things like that. So, yeah, it's good if Twitter are doing their best to create a good experience around that, and maybe it will take over. I don't know. It's funny to see this explosion of, we're doing audio too now. I think is it Slack and other people are introducing audio as a catch up. But it's a nice reminder, especially for those of us who like it, like podcasters, that voice matters, voice is nice, and it's a very good way to connect with people. So I'm looking forward to Twitter audioing with you. What do we call it? Twitter Spaces?
They're called Twitter Spaces, yes.
That's a bit weird.
And there is the option to have captions.
Right.
I turned them on. They're okay. There's quite a delay. But hey, that means they're working on it. So listeners, I'm going to say for now, we're going to see how this goes. But let's just see. I might turn up from now on every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Because what's nice about this, I've been wanting to do a regular kind of live thing for ages, but the fact to be on video, sitting down, blah, blah, all of that is just like, well, I can't make sure that every Wednesday at 12 o'clock I can do that. But with this, it can be anywhere.
Yes.
And we shall see. So you won't be able to make the first one, which we're doing tomorrow, that Maya was talking about, which will be on hybrid workspaces. And when I say will be, that will be what we start talking about. And so yes, look out, follow me on Twitter at Pilar Orti.
Yeah. Are they recorded? Are they just kind of, it's there, you're in the moment, or you miss it?
It is,
and you come back next time.
Ephemeral. You can say what you want.
Right. Okay. Let's get political. Let's get sensitive. No, maybe not.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So that's great. So Twitter, thank you. And also I'll just mention, I did have a listener of the show message me on Twitter, and I wanted to say hello to Luke from Managing Remote Teams, which is also a podcast. I haven't had a chance to listen yet, but they've got quite a few episodes, so listeners, you might be interested in that. His Twitter username is managing_remote. And what Luke said, I don't have the tweet in front of me, is that he really enjoyed these episodes, Maya, because they kept him during the year of the pandemic. They just kept him up to date with what was going on. So thank you for listening, Luke, and thank you for telling us.
It's always so nice to hear. There is this thing of sort of podcasting into a vacuum sometimes. So it's great when we get those connections from people and telling us how it's affected you and what you've got out of it. So keep them coming.
So, listeners, on that note, then I will roll out the calls to action because we've managed to make this under an hour, which is great because I'm finding myself releasing episodes every week now. So hopefully this gives you some space to listen to them. So make sure you're subscribed to the show, the 21st Century Work-Life Podcast, which I'm thinking of rebranding it to the company name, but we shall see. But whatever podcast app you use, you should find us there. You can sign up to our monthly newsletter with listening and reading recommendations over at virtualnotdistant.com. We're on LinkedIn. Our Twitter account is Virtual Teamwork with a 0 instead of an O. And if you want to get in touch, Pilar at virtualnotdistant.com. Maya, do you want to say goodbye before we head off?
Goodbye, and thank you for listening.
A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work-Life Podcast produced by Virtual Not Distant. If you have something to add to the conversation, let us know through the contact form over at virtualnotdistant.com. I have been your host, Pilar Orti, and I'm signing off now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.